Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters in Christ, I want you to hear me today because I believe God is about to do something big in your life. The Bible says in Jeremiah 29:11, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a future and a hope." But before that blessing arrives, before the breakthrough happens, there will be signs. Clear signs. And if you are going through a difficult season, if the enemy is attacking you, if life seems uncertain right now, I want you to listen carefully, because it could mean that God is preparing you for something greater than you can imagine. When God is about to give you something big, something that will change your life forever, you will face opposition like never before. And I'm not talking about small inconveniences or tiny roadblocks. I'm talking about storms that shake your very foundation, battles that make you question if you even heard God right, attacks so intense, so relentless, that you wonder if you're really meant for the blessing that's coming. But listen to me, the size of your battle is often an indication of the size of your breakthrough. Look at the life of Jesus. Before he stepped into his full ministry, what happened? He was led into the wilderness. The enemy came at him with every temptation, every lie, every trick. Why? Because Satan knew if Jesus walked in his purpose, the kingdom of darkness would be destroyed. And let me tell you, the same enemy that tried to stop Jesus is trying to stop you. He sees what's coming. He knows the doors that are about to open for you. He sees the anointing on your life, and he is afraid. Have you ever noticed that? Right when you start making progress, everything starts going wrong. The moment you commit to growing in faith, distractions hit you from every side. You decide to finally chase your dream, and suddenly unexpected problems pop up. You step into a relationship that feels like it's from God, and immediately opposition starts rising up against it. That's not a coincidence. That's confirmation. The enemy doesn't fight people who are going nowhere. If you're under attack, it's because you are a threat. The devil isn't worried about people who are satisfied with a mediocre life. He's terrified of those who dare to step into their God-given purpose. Think about Joseph. He had a dream, a vision from God that he would be great, that he would lead, that he would have influence. But what happened next? His own brothers turned against him. The people closest to him, the ones who should have supported him, became his biggest opposition. They threw him into a pit, sold him into slavery, and left him for dead. Some of you know what that feels like. You shared your dreams with people you trusted, and instead of encouraging you, they tried to shut you down. You stepped out in faith, and suddenly people who used to be your friends started pulling away. But that's because not everyone can handle what God is about to do in your life. Some people will only love you as long as you stay on their level. But the moment God starts elevating you, their true colors come out. And let's talk about setbacks. Have you ever felt like just when things start going right, something knocks you back down? Joseph didn't just face betrayal. He was falsely accused, thrown into prison for something he did. It looked like every step forward came with 2 steps back. Some of you feel like that right now. You're saying, God, why does it feel like the harder I try, the worse things get? But hear me, just because it looks like a setback doesn't mean it isn't part of God's setup. The prison wasn't Joseph's end. It was a transition to his destiny. If Joseph had never been in that prison, he wouldn't have met the cupbearer. And if he hadn't met the cupbearer, he wouldn't have been introduced to Pharaoh. And if he hadn't been introduced to Pharaoh, he never would have stepped into the promise God had given him. So don't be discouraged when things don't go the way you planned. Sometimes opposition is just God's way of repositioning you. You may have lost that job, but what if that was never the place God meant for you? That relationship may have ended, but what if it was only holding you back from what God really has for you? What looks like rejection today may actually be protection for tomorrow. Have you ever seen an archer pull back an arrow? The further back the arrow is pulled, the farther it will fly. And some of you feel like life is pulling you back. The pressure is heavy. The struggle is real. The attacks won't stop, but I need you to know God isn't pulling you back to leave you there. He's setting you up for a launch. You are about to soar higher than you ever imagined. And let's talk about pressure. Some of you are feeling the weight of life pressing down on you. But have you ever thought about what pressure does? Diamonds are formed under extreme pressure. Gold is purified in the fire. Olive oil, which was used to anoint kings, comes from olives that have been crushed. There's no anointing without crushing. There's no breakthrough without a battle. Look at David. He was anointed to be king, but before he ever sat on the throne, he had to face Goliath. He had to run for his life. He had to endure years of hardship. God had already chosen him, but there was still a process he had to go through. And some of you are in that process right now. You know your call. You know there's something greater for you. But the battles are fierce. The obstacles seem impossible. But let me remind you, Goliath wasn't a sign that David was in the wrong place. He was proof that David was about to step into something great. Your Goliath is not there to defeat you, it's there to reveal you. Your struggle is not a sign that God has forgotten you, it's proof that He's preparing you. So the next time opposition rises against you, don't run from it, don't shrink back. Stand firm, look the enemy in the eye and say, I must be close, because if I wasn't, you wouldn't be fighting me this hard. You are not under attack because you're weak. You are under attack because you are strong. You are not facing opposition because you are failing. You are facing it because you are stepping into victory. The battle is the loudest right before the breakthrough. The storm is the fiercest right before the skies clear. And when the enemy comes at you with everything he has, it's because he knows you are right on the edge of something big. There is nothing more frustrating than waiting. We live in a world that hates to wait. We want instant answers, instant success, instant change. We want things to happen now, and when they don't, we start to wonder if we did something wrong. But listen to me, when God is about to give you something big, He will often make you wait. Not because He is punishing you, not because He has forgotten you, but because what He is preparing for you is greater than what you even asked for. Have you ever been in a place where you prayed, you fasted, you believed, and yet nothing happened? Have you ever wondered why God gave you the vision but hasn't opened the door yet? You see others moving forward, stepping into their blessings, but you're still stuck, still waiting, still wondering if your time will ever come. That is where faith is tested. That is where patience is built. And that is where God does His greatest work. Look at Abraham. God gave him a promise so incredible that it seemed impossible. He told him, you will be the father of many nations. But do you know how long Abraham had to wait before that promise was fulfilled? 25 years. 25 years of believing, 25 years of hoping, 25 years of wondering if he had heard God right. Some of you can't wait 25 minutes without getting frustrated, but Abraham waited 25 years. And what about Joseph? God gave him a dream that he would be a ruler. But before he saw that dream come to life, he was thrown into a pit, sold as a slave, falsely accused, and locked in a prison. Year after year went by, and instead of moving forward, it looked like he was moving backward. Have you ever felt like that? Like every step you take, instead of progress, you face a setback? Instead of moving toward your promise, you feel like you're sinking further away? That's how Joseph must have felt. But what Joseph didn't know was that God was working behind the scenes. He didn't see the bigger picture. He didn't know that his delay was actually setting him up for something greater than he ever imagined. See, there's a difference between human timing and God's timing. We live by clocks and calendars, but God lives by purpose. We think in days and months, but God thinks in destiny. And sometimes what seems like a delay is actually divine alignment. God is not just preparing the blessing for you, He is preparing you for the blessing. Because a blessing given too soon can become a burden. Imagine giving the keys to a brand new sports car to a 10-year-old child. The car isn't the problem. The promise isn't the problem. The problem is that the child isn't ready. And if God gives you something before you're ready, it could destroy you instead of bless you. That's why He makes you wait. That's why He takes His time. He's strengthening you, he's shaping you, he's making sure that when the blessing comes, you can carry it with wisdom, with grace, with faith. Look at David. He was anointed to be king as a young boy. Samuel poured oil on his head and declared that he was chosen by God. But did he step into the palace the next day? No. He had to go back to the field. He had to keep tending sheep. He had to fight battles. He had to face Goliath. He had to run for his life. He had to wait years before he finally sat on the throne. And every moment of waiting was not wasted. It was preparation. You see, the waiting season is where God teaches you to trust him. It's where he strips away your pride. It's where he strengthens your character. It's where he makes sure that when you step into your promise, you won't forget who brought you there. Have you ever watched a construction site? The taller the building, the deeper they dig the foundation. If God is making you wait, it's because he's digging deep. He's laying a foundation so strong that when the blessing comes, you won't be shaken. Think about a farmer. When he plants a seed, he doesn't see results immediately. He doesn't dig it up every day to check if it's growing. He knows that growth happens underground in the unseen. And some of you feel like nothing is happening in your life, but let me tell you, God is working beneath the surface. The roots are growing, the foundation is strengthening, and when the time is right, the harvest will come. And let's talk about Jesus. Even he had to wait. He didn't start his ministry until he was 30. Think about that. The Son of God, the Savior of the world, waited in obscurity for years before stepping into his calling. And when he finally did, the impact was greater than anyone could have imagined. So if you're in a season of waiting, don't lose heart. Don't give up. Delays are not denials. Closed doors are not rejections. They are redirections. The longer the wait, the bigger the blessing. The greater the delay, the greater the destiny. God is setting you up for something that is worth every second of the wait. Have you ever felt like you were out of place, like something inside of you was unsettled, like no matter what you did, there was this deep stirring that wouldn't go away? You try to go about your daily routine, but something inside keeps whispering, there's more. You weren't meant to stay here. You weren't meant to settle. It's an unshakable feeling, a divine discomfort. You may not be able to explain it, but you know something is shifting, something is moving, something bigger is calling you. This is what happens when God is preparing you for something greater. It's called supernatural restlessness. It's that inner stirring that refuses to let you get comfortable where you are, because where you are is not your final destination. God is trying to move you. He is trying to shift you. He is trying to get your attention. Think about a baby in the womb. As it grows, it starts to move. It stretches, it kicks, it turns, and the closer it gets to its due season, the more uncomfortable it becomes. The womb that once felt like home is now too small. It can no longer stay where it is. And when the time is right, that baby has no choice but to be pushed into something greater, into life itself. Some of you are feeling that pressure right now. The place you once felt comfortable in now feels tight, restricted. The things that used to satisfy you no longer do. The people who used to understand you no longer relate to you. It's because God is birthing something new in you. You're outgrowing where you are. Look at Moses. He was raised in Pharaoh's palace, given the best education, the best food, the best of everything. He had wealth, power, and influence. But something inside of him was restless. Something inside of him told him, this is not where I belong. He could have lived out his days in luxury, but he wasn't created for comfort. He was created for calling. And one day, that restlessness caused him to step out and make a decision that changed his entire life. He left the palace, left the riches, left everything he knew, because something inside of him told him that there was a greater purpose waiting for him. And what about Nehemiah? He was the cupbearer to the king, a prestigious job, a secure position. But something inside of him couldn't rest. He heard that the walls of Jerusalem were broken down, and he couldn't shake the feeling that he had to do something about it. Night and day he wrestled with this burden. He couldn't sleep, he couldn't ignore it. He knew that staying where he was would be easy, but stepping into what God was calling him to do would require risk, sacrifice, and faith. But that restlessness was not there by accident. It was God pushing him into his purpose. And because he listened to that divine stirring, he went on to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem and restore a nation. That's the thing about supernatural restlessness. It won't let you settle. It won't let you stay where you are. It keeps pushing you, pulling you, reminding you that you were created for something more. You can try to ignore it, but it won't go away. You can try to drown it out with distractions, but it will still be there. You can try to force yourself to be satisfied with where you are, but deep down you know you're being called higher. Have you ever watched a bird build a nest? At first, that nest is a place of comfort, a place of security. The baby birds feel safe there. But as they grow, the mother starts to make the nest uncomfortable. She starts removing the soft feathers, the warm lining. She does this not because she wants to harm her babies, but because she knows that if they get too comfortable, they will never learn to fly. And some of you feel like God is shaking your nest. The things that used to be easy are now hard. The place that used to feel like home now feels like a prison. That's not by accident. God is making sure you don't get stuck where you were never meant to stay. Think about David. Before he became king, he was a shepherd. He spent his days in the fields, tending sheep, playing his harp, minding his own business. But something inside of him knew, this is not my final place. He wasn't just called to be a shepherd, he was called to be a king. And even though it took years before he stepped into his destiny, he never lost that hunger for more. That restlessness was God's way of preparing him. And what about you? Have you been feeling like there's something more for you? Have you felt like you're stuck between where you are and where you're supposed to be? Have you been restless, unable to shake the feeling that something is shifting? That is God speaking to you. That is God preparing you. That is God telling you, don't settle. Keep moving. Keep pressing. Keep believing. When God is about to give you something big, he will stir something inside of you that won't let you rest until you step into it. That stirring is not there to frustrate you. It's there to elevate you. It's there to remind you that you were not meant for small things. You were not meant to stay in one place. You were meant for greater, and that greater is coming. But first you have to be willing to leave the comfort zone. You have to be willing to step into the unknown. You have to be willing to trust that the one who placed that restlessness inside of you is the same one who will lead you into your destiny. You didn't see it coming. You thought things were going one way, and suddenly they changed. A relationship you thought would last forever came to an end. A job you thought was secure was taken away. A door you were sure God had opened was slammed shut in your face, and now you're standing in the middle of an unexpected ending, wondering what went wrong, wondering why things didn't turn out the way you planned, wondering where God is in all of this. But hear me, unexpected endings are often divine setups. What feels like a sudden loss is often God making room for something greater. What seems like a rejection is often a redirection. The pain of an ending is sometimes the preparation for a new beginning. Think about Elijah. He had just experienced one of the greatest victories of his life, calling down fire from heaven, proving that God is the one true God, defeating the prophets of Baal. He should have been celebrating. He should have been riding on the high of victory. But instead, right after that incredible moment, everything changed. Queen Jezebel threatened his life, and suddenly he found himself on the run, hiding in a cave, feeling abandoned, depressed, and lost. How could something so great turn into something so painful so fast? How could a mountaintop moment lead straight into a valley? Some of you know exactly what that feels like. You had a moment of joy, a moment of breakthrough, a moment where everything seemed to be coming together, only for it to fall apart in an instant. And now, like Elijah, you're sitting in your own cave asking, God, what happened? Where are you? But here's what you need to understand. When something ends unexpectedly, it doesn't mean God has abandoned you. It means he's about to take you somewhere new. It means he's shifting your season. It means he's preparing you for something you can't see yet. Look at Ruth. She had a life planned out with her husband. She had a future in front of her. Then suddenly it was all taken away. Her husband died. Her dreams shattered. Everything she expected her life to be was gone in a moment. She could have stayed in Moab. stuck in grief, stuck in disappointment, but instead she chose to move forward. She followed Naomi to Bethlehem. She didn't know what was ahead. She didn't have a plan. But what she didn't realize was that on the other side of that unexpected ending, God had a blessing waiting for her. She met Boaz. She became part of the lineage of Jesus. She stepped into a destiny that was far greater than anything she had lost. Some of you are still holding on to what ended. You're still grieving what you lost. And I get it. The pain is real. The disappointment is real. But what if I told you that God is not just the God of beginnings, He is the God of endings too. And if He allowed something to end, if He closed a door, if He removed something from your life, it's because He had something better waiting on the other side. Joseph had to face an unexpected ending too. He had a dream, a vision of greatness. But instead of stepping into it immediately, his life took a different turn. His brothers betrayed him. He was sold into slavery. He was falsely accused and thrown into prison. Every time it seemed like things were getting better, something happened to knock him back down. How many of you feel like that? Like every time you start making progress, something pulls you back. Like every time you think you're finally getting a breakthrough, something closes. But what Joseph didn't know was that every ending he faced was setting him up for something greater. He didn't see it in the pit. He didn't see it in the prison. But when the time was right, he was brought before Pharaoh, and in one day his entire life changed. He went from being forgotten to being second in command over all of Egypt. The pain of his past suddenly made sense. The unexpected endings were actually stepping stones to the place God had destined for him all along. And let's not forget about Jesus. His disciples followed him for years. They believed he was the Messiah, the one who would save them. They saw him perform miracles. They heard his teachings. They expected him to establish his kingdom. But then, in the most shocking and heartbreaking moment, he was arrested, beaten, crucified, dead. This wasn't supposed to happen. This wasn't part of their plan. Their hopes, their dreams, their expectations, it all came crashing down. But what they didn't understand was that the crucifixion wasn't the end. It was the beginning. The very thing they thought was the worst possible outcome was actually the greatest victory in history, because 3 days later, Jesus rose from the grave. And suddenly, what looked like an unexpected ending turned out to be the greatest plan of God all along. Some of you are staring at a closed door, crying over what you lost, wondering why things didn't turn out the way you expected. But what if I told you that this isn't the end of your story? What if I told you that the thing you thought was breaking you is actually making? What if I told you that God is working behind the scenes, setting you up for something bigger than you ever imagined? The business that failed, the relationship that ended, the opportunity that slipped through your fingers. It may have felt like the end, but it's not. It's just a chapter. And God is about to write a new one. The unexpected ending was not there to destroy you. It was there to prepare you, because what's coming next is far greater than what you left behind. Have you ever experienced a moment where something small just seemed to go your way? A parking spot opened up exactly when you needed it. A random stranger offered you help when you weren't even looking for it. You found money in a place you didn't remember leaving it. A problem that should have been complicated suddenly worked itself out with ease. Most people overlook these things. They call it luck, coincidence, or just one of those days. But those who walk with God know better. That's not luck. That's unusual favor. That's God whispering, I see you, I am with you, I am working behind the scenes in ways you don't even realize. Because here's what you need to understand. Before God releases something big, He will often show you His hand in the small things. Before He pours out major blessings, He will drop little reminders along the way. And those small moments of favor, they are signals, they are signs that something bigger is coming. Look at David. Before he ever fought Goliath, before he ever became king, before anyone even knew his name, he was just a shepherd boy tending sheep. But even in the fields, God was with him. Even in the small, unnoticed moments, David experienced unusual favor. A lion came to attack the sheep and David killed it. A bear came and he took it down too. Nobody saw it. Nobody clapped for him. But God was preparing him. That favor in the small things was proof that David was being positioned for something greater. And then when the moment came for him to face Goliath, he didn't hesitate. Why? Because he had already seen God's favor in the small battles. He knew that if God could help him defeat a lion, if God could help him take down a bear, then surely God could help him slay a giant. Some of you are looking for a massive breakthrough, but you're missing the small victories. You're so focused on the big thing you want God to do that you're not even noticing how He's already moving in the little things. You're waiting for a major door to open, but you're not seeing the smaller doors that are already swinging in your favor. Look at Ruth. She had nothing. She had lost her husband. She was in a foreign land with no security, no income, no plan. But then something small happened. She just so happened to find herself in the field of a man named Boaz. She didn't know who he was. She wasn't looking for a miracle. She was just trying to survive. But Boaz noticed her. He showed her kindness. He told his workers to leave extra grain for her to pick up. A small thing, a little favor. But that small moment of favor was the beginning of something much bigger. That small act of kindness led to a relationship. That relationship led to a marriage. And that marriage led to Ruth becoming part of the lineage of Jesus Christ. A small moment that looked like nothing at the time turned out to be the start of a destiny-changing blessing. Some of you are so focused on the grand finale that you're missing the small signs of favor happening right now. You're looking for $1 million opportunity, but you're ignoring the little doors God is opening that will lead you there. You're asking God for a platform, but you're overlooking the small assignments He's giving you now. Think about the boy with the 5 loaves and 2 fish. He wasn't rich. He wasn't a king. He wasn't an important man. He was just a boy with a small lunch. But when he placed that small thing in Jesus' hands, it became more than enough to feed thousands. That's the power of unusual favor in small things. What seems insignificant to you can become supernatural when placed in God's hands. And what about Peter? He had fished all night and caught nothing. He was exhausted, frustrated, ready to give up. And then Jesus came along and told him to cast his net on the other side. Now think about this. Peter was a professional fisherman. He had been doing this his whole life. And here was Jesus, a carpenter, telling him how to fish. It didn't make sense. It seemed like a small, pointless instruction. But Peter obeyed. And in that moment, favor was released. His nets were suddenly overflowing with fish, so much that they began to break. It was a small moment, a simple act of obedience, but it changed everything, because that moment wasn't just about fish. That moment was a sign, a glimpse of what was coming. Peter had no idea that this small favor was leading him to something greater, that in just a short time he would leave those nets behind and step into his true calling as a fisher of men. And what about you? Maybe you've been feeling stuck. Maybe you've been wondering why the big breakthrough hasn't come yet. Maybe you've been questioning if God even sees you. But I challenge you to start looking for the small signs of favor, that unexpected discount, that random opportunity, that conversation with someone who just so happens to have the connection you need, that moment when things just happen to work out in your favor. That's not random. That's not coincidence. That's God setting you up. Because here's the truth. If you can recognize His favor in the small things, you will be ready for the big things. If you can be faithful in the little, He can trust you with more. If you can celebrate the small victories, you're preparing yourself for greater breakthroughs. So don't despise the small things. Don't overlook the little moments of favor. They are proof that God is working. They are signs that He has not forgotten you, and they are reminders that something much bigger is coming. Have you ever met someone unexpectedly, and later you realize that meeting changed your life? You were in the right place at the right time. A conversation you didn't plan led to an opportunity you never imagined. A door that had been shut for years suddenly swung open because of a single connection. That is not luck. That is not coincidence. That is what I call a sudden divine connection. When God places the right person in your path at just the right moment to shift your destiny. Some of the greatest moments in your life won't happen because you planned them. They won't happen because you strategized, networked, or made the perfect decision. No, the greatest moments will happen when God orchestrates a divine meeting that you never saw coming. Look at Joseph. He was in prison, forgotten, overlooked. He had no way out. But then one day, Pharaoh had a dream that no one could interpret. And suddenly the cupbearer, who had forgotten about Joseph for years, remembered him. That one connection changed everything. Joseph went from the prison to the palace in a single day. Do you see it? It wasn't a gradual process. It wasn't years of working his way up. It was a sudden divine connection that shifted everything in an instant. That's how God works. When he is about to move you into something greater, he will send someone into your life who carries the key to your next level. And it won't always make sense. It won't always be someone you expect. But it will always be exactly what you need. Think about Ruth. She had no future, no security, no idea what to do next. She was simply gathering leftover grain in a field, just trying to survive. But then, suddenly, Boaz saw her, not by accident, not by chance. It was a divine connection. She didn't chase him. She didn't manipulate the situation. She was just in the right place at the right time because God was guiding her steps. And that one connection led to her marrying Boaz, securing her future, and becoming part of the lineage of Jesus Christ. Some of you have been striving, working, exhausting yourselves, trying to make something happen. You've been knocking on doors, pushing, stressing, wondering why things aren't moving. But let me tell you something. When God sends a divine connection, you won't have to force it. You won't have to beg. You won't have to manipulate anything. It will happen suddenly, unexpectedly, effortlessly. Remember David, he was just a shepherd boy. No one saw him as a king. No one even considered him. But then one day the prophet Samuel showed up at his house looking for the next king of Israel. David wasn't even invited to the selection process. His own family overlooked him. But what they didn't know was that God had already chosen him. And when it was time, Samuel said, "We will not sit down until he arrives." That was a divine connection. One moment David was tending sheep. The next moment he was anointed to be king. Do you see the pattern? The biggest shifts in destiny happen through sudden divine connections. Look at Esther. A Jewish girl living in exile, no power, no influence, no reason to believe she could ever be anything more than ordinary. But suddenly she was brought into the king's palace. She caught his favor, and before she knew it, she was queen. She never campaigned for it. She never chased after it. It was a divine setup. And that connection placed her in a position to save an entire nation. Now let's bring it to your life. Have you been feeling like you're stuck, like nothing is moving? Like the doors are closed? Let me tell you something. When it's your time, God will send the right person into your life and everything will shift. You won't have to manipulate it. You won't have to struggle. The connection will find you. Think about the people you've met unexpectedly. That teacher who believed in you when no one else did. That mentor who gave you a chance when you had no experience. That friend who introduced you to an opportunity that changed your life. Those were not accidents. Those were divine connections. Some of you are praying for opportunities, but God is sending you people, because opportunities often come disguised as relationships. That job you've been asking for, it's going to come through a connection. That open door you've been waiting on, it's going to be linked to a person God is sending your way. That's why you have to be careful how you treat people. You never know who carries the key to your breakthrough. You never know who God is using to open your next door. Some of you have been praying for a miracle, but what if the answer to your prayer is a person? What if the connection that will shift your life is already around you and you just haven't recognized it yet? Look at Jesus and the disciples. Peter, James, John. They were just fishermen. They were just ordinary men living their lives. But then suddenly, Jesus walked by and said, "Follow me." In a single moment, everything changed. They didn't plan for it, they didn't expect it, but that one connection with Jesus turned them into world changers. And what about Paul? He was on his way to Damascus to persecute Christians when suddenly he had a divine encounter with Jesus. That one moment changed the entire trajectory of his life. One connection turned him from a persecutor into a preacher, from a murderer into a missionary. And what about you? You may not see it yet, but God is aligning your path with the right people. He is setting up divine appointments. He is orchestrating sudden encounters that will change everything. Maybe you're one introduction away from the breakthrough you've been praying for. Maybe you're one conversation away from stepping into your destiny. Maybe the very thing you've been asking God for is about to show up in the form of a person. So don't worry about how it's going to happen. Don't stress over the details. Just stay ready, stay open, stay faithful, because when God sends a sudden divine connection, everything can change in an instant. There comes a time in every believer's life when God will ask for something that doesn't make sense. He will call you to step out when there's no guarantee. He will ask you to walk in faith when the facts are screaming otherwise. He will ask you to trust him when everything in your mind is telling you it's impossible. That's radical faith. The kind of faith that doesn't just believe in God when things are easy, but believes even when the odds are stacked against you. Radical faith is when God says go and you move even when you don't see the path. It's when he says give and you give, even when your hands feel empty. It's when he says trust me and you do, even when the storm is raging all around you. Look at Abraham. God told him, leave your father's house, leave your country, go to a land I will show you. No map, no blueprint, no confirmation, just How many of us would be willing to step out on nothing but a word from God? That's radical faith. And because Abraham was willing to believe, he became the father of many nations. But let's be honest, radical faith is not easy. It's not comfortable. It doesn't feel safe. Radical faith will require you to move when others say you're crazy. It will require you to believe when others tell you to quit. It will require you to trust when everything inside you wants to give up. Look at Noah. God told him to build an ark, but there was no sign of rain, no storms, no floods, just a command. Can you imagine what people said? Noah, you're wasting your time. Noah, you're insane. Noah, it's never even rained like that before. But Noah didn't listen to the voices around him. He listened to the voice of God. And because of his radical faith, he and his family were saved while the rest of the world drowned. Radical faith will make you look foolish to the world before it makes you victorious. Radical faith will require you to keep walking when you don't see results. It will ask you to pray for things that seem impossible. It will tell you to stand firm even when the enemy is pressing in. Look at Peter. He was in a boat in the middle of a storm. The winds were raging. The waves were crashing. And suddenly Jesus appeared walking on the water. And Peter said, Lord, if it's really you, tell me to come. Jesus said, come. And Peter did what no man had ever done before. He stepped out of the boat. Now, let's be real. That boat was safe. Radical faith steps into the unknown. Peter didn't wait for the storm to calm down. He didn't ask for the waves to stop first. He stepped out while the wind was still blowing. That's radical faith. Trusting God even while the storm is still raging. And for a moment, Peter walked on water. He did the impossible. But the moment he took his eyes off Jesus, the moment he focused on the storm instead of the Savior, he began to sink. And that's what happens when we let fear override our faith. That's what happens when we let doubt creep in. Some of you are standing at the edge of something right now. You're looking at the water and you hear God saying, step out. But fear is holding you back. Logic is telling you this doesn't make sense. The enemy is whispering, you're going to sink. But hear me. If God is calling you, he will sustain you. If he told you to step, then he has already made a way for you. Look at the widow in Zarephath. She had nothing left, just a handful of flour and a little bit of oil. She was preparing to eat her last meal and die. But then the prophet Elijah showed up and said, make me a small cake first. Now imagine that moment. Imagine the fear. This is all I have. If I give it away, what will I eat? What about my son? What if this doesn't? But radical faith doesn't calculate risk, it obeys. And because she obeyed, the oil never ran out, the flour never ran dry. Some of you are standing in front of a test of faith right now. God is asking you to trust Him with something that doesn't make sense. He's asking you to let go of something you're holding on to. He's asking you to step into something new. But radical faith isn't just about believing in miracles. It's about obeying when obedience doesn't feel easy. Look at Joshua and the walls of Jericho. God told him, march around the walls for 7 days, and on the 7th day the walls will fall. That doesn't make sense. Military strategy would say, build weapons, attack the walls, fight. But God's strategy was different. Walk, wait, worship. And for 6 days nothing happened. No cracks in the walls, no signs of victory. And that's when faith is tested the most, when you obey God and see no result. But on the 7th day, after they marched, after they worshiped, after they obeyed, the walls came crashing down. Some of you are in that season of marching right now. You've been praying, but nothing's changed. You've been believing, but the walls are still standing. But hear me, don't stop now. Don't quit on day 6 when your breakthrough is coming on day 7. Radical faith doesn't stop because it doesn't see results yet. Radical faith keeps moving. Look at Jesus. He had radical faith in the Father's plan. He knew the cross was coming. He knew the suffering He would endure. And yet He still said, not my will, but yours be done. That is the ultimate example of radical faith. Trusting God's plan even when it requires sacrifice. And what about you? What is God asking you to believe for? What step of faith is He calling you to take? Maybe He's telling you to start that business, but fear is holding you back. Maybe He's telling you to leave that toxic relationship, but comfort is keeping you stuck. Maybe He's telling you to give, to serve, to move, to trust, but doubt is whispering, what if it doesn't work? Radical faith doesn't wait for all the answers. It doesn't wait for perfect conditions. It doesn't wait for human confirmation. It hears God's voice and moves. So whatever God is asking of you, do it. Step out. Trust Him. Because on the other side of radical faith is radical favor. And when you dare to believe God for the impossible, you will see Him do what only He can do. There is a kind of peace that defies human understanding. A peace so deep, so unshakable, that even in the middle of life's worst storms, it holds you steady. It's the kind of peace that makes no sense, the kind that shouldn't be there when everything is falling apart, and yet it is. This is not an ordinary peace. It's not the kind of peace the world gives, the peace that only exists when everything is going well, when the bills are paid, when the relationships are strong, when the future is clear. No, this is a supernatural peace, a peace that shows up when the storms rage, when the foundation shakes, when everything around you is screaming panic, but something deep within you whispers, be still. It's the peace that Jesus had when He was sleeping in the boat while a violent storm was raging. The disciples were terrified, the waves were crashing, the wind was howling, and there was Jesus, resting, unbothered, unmoved, because He knew something they didn't. He knew that when you are in the hands of God, no storm can sink you. Have you ever seen someone walk through a crisis with unshakable calmness? Have you ever watched someone face what should have broken them, yet they stood strong? That is what happens when God gives you peace in the midst of chaos. Look at Daniel. He was thrown into a den full of hungry lions, certain death. Yet he slept. He had peace. He wasn't pacing. He wasn't panicking. He wasn't pleading for his life. Why? Because he knew that the God who shut the mouths of the lions was greater than the fear in his heart. That's the kind of peace God gives. Peace that doesn't depend on circumstances. Peace that doesn't waver when life gets hard. The world tells you that peace comes when everything is perfect. But God says peace comes when you trust in Him even when nothing makes sense. Look at Paul and Silas. They were beaten. They were thrown in prison, chained up, in pain. And yet at midnight they weren't crying, they weren't complaining, they weren't questioning God, they were singing, they were worshiping. And in the middle of their praise, the prison shook, the chains broke, and they walked free. Do you see what happens when you carry God's peace? The enemy can throw you in the darkest places, but he cannot take your joy. He can attack your life, but he cannot steal your worship. When you have peace in the midst of chaos, you confuse the devil, because he expects you to break, he expects you to quit. But when you keep standing, when you keep trusting, when you keep praising in spite of the storm, he knows he has no power over you. Some of you have been walking through chaos lately. The storm is raging, the pressure is high. Maybe it's the financial struggle that keeps you up at night. Maybe it's the health crisis that you weren't expecting. Maybe it's the betrayal of someone you trusted. And everything inside of you is telling you to worry, to panic, to fear. But God is saying, be still, I am with you. When the 3 Hebrew boys were thrown into the fiery furnace, they had every reason to be afraid. The fire was real, the heat was deadly, but they stood firm. They said, we know our God can deliver us, but even if he doesn't, we will not bow. That is peace in the midst of chaos. When you are so anchored in God that even if the worst happens, you refuse to be shaken. And what happened? They went into the fire, but they were not alone. A 4th man appeared in the flames with them, and when they walked out, not a single hair on their heads was burned. They didn't even smell like smoke. That's what happens when God gives you peace. You go through the fire, but you don't come out burned. You go through the storm, but you don't drown. You go through the trial, but it doesn't destroy you. Some of you are in a furnace right now. The heat is unbearable. The pressure is intense. But hear me, you are not alone. There is another in the fire with you. And if you hold on, if you refuse to bow to fear, if you stand firm in faith, you will come out of this stronger than before. Jesus said, my peace I give to you, not as the world gives. That means his peace is different. It's not based on what's happening around you, it's based on who is with you. It's a peace that walks with you through the valley of the shadow of death. It's a peace that says, though I am surrounded, I am not afraid. Look at Job. He lost everything, his family, his wealth, his health. And yet in the middle of his pain, he said, though he slay me, yet will I trust him. That's what it looks like to have peace in the midst of chaos. To trust God even when you don't understand him. There is a place in God where worry cannot reach you. There is a place in God where fear loses its grip. There is a place in God where even when the battle is raging, your heart is calm. And that place is found when you fix your eyes on him. Peter learned this the hard way. When he was walking on water, he was fine as long as he kept his eyes on Jesus. But the moment he looked at the waves, the moment he focused on the storm, he began to sink. That's what happens when we take our eyes off God. The chaos will try to pull you under. The fear will try to overwhelm you. But if you keep your focus on Jesus, you will walk above the storm. Some of you have been sinking lately. You've been focused on the problem instead of the promise. You've been looking at the storm instead of the Savior. But today God is saying, lift your eyes. Focus on me. I am your peace. There is a supernatural peace that cannot be explained. It's the peace that kept David standing before Goliath without fear. It's the peace that kept Moses walking toward the Red Sea when there was no way out. It's the peace that kept Jesus silent before his accusers, knowing that the cross was not the end of his story. And that same peace is available to you. No matter what is happening around you, no matter how fierce the battle, no matter how impossible the situation, when you have God's peace, you will stand unshaken.